Hello everyone! Today we will talk about sign language ecologies in West Africa, and we're presenting with a group, and you can see the names on the slide, and we are all working on West African languages. Since the early days of sign language research, linguists have identified the multilingual nature of deaf communities. In terms of sign languages, they found that there is an important distinction between two varieties, with the deep sign language, with its own grammar and lexicon on the one hand, and sign-supported speech on the other, which basically combines the lexicon of the sign language with the grammar of the spoken language. And this was found again and again in various Western or so-called weird countries over and over again. In the 1980s, an additional movement came up to name national sign languages, to use the national label to increase the visibility and advocate for the recognition of the national sign language. On the African continent, researchers have been pointing out for a long time that multilingualism is the norm rather than the exception. And whereas diglossia has been found in the deaf communities, in African spoken contexts, actually triglossia or polyglossia is commonly found, with a former colonial language like French or English being seen as the more prestigious variety or variant that is used in formal contexts, and a large local spoken language, lingua franca, that is used in public spaces, and perhaps a smaller minority language or languages in private spaces for informal communication. So this raises the question how this works out for African sign languages. To get a better understanding of the multilingualism and basically the distribution of their uses and their status, we need to look at the dynamics of individuals, but also groups, and also the development of time and space. And in the case of sign languages, this means deaf schools, pioneers, but also the timing and the locations of deaf schools, deaf associations, networks of deaf leaders, and the attitudes towards spoken languages in the larger national context. These can all influence how sign languages are used. In deaf spaces, we can actually see some of the status that particular sign varieties have. So do we see at a deaf school or at a deaf club, do we see depictions of signing? And if so, from which sign language? Perhaps a foreign one like ASL or local signs? And the same is true for TV interpretation. Which sign language or sign languages do we see on TV? For West Africa, a well-known factor of importance is the work of Andrew and Bertha Foster and the family at large, who have been setting up deaf schools since the 1950s, and with the consequence of emerging networks of deaf leaders, and also particularly those active in deaf education. And this also seems to have had linguistic consequences on the sign language use. So in this network, particularly the use of signed English and signed French is prominent. Also the use of initializations, and perhaps also the introduction or the propagation of particular lexemes, particular signs that have become perhaps characteristic of African forms of ASL. And we'll see some examples on the next slide. The work of the Fosters led to the creation of a network of deaf leaders and who would become influential in deaf education. And in this group, one of the senior persons was Serge Tamomo from Benin. And in 1994, he published a dictionary of a form of signing, a form of ASL with that is particularly adapted to the Francophone situations. So it has French elements in it, and it has also adapted to local cultural concepts.
In Ghana, the deaf community in the urban setting have three different variants for their sign language. First, they have one variant called English. Second, they have another variant called Broken. And third, they have another variant they called local. In most situations, the first variant is a high variety, and the third variant is a low variety. And you have situations where the high variety will overshadow the low variety, which is local, in the signing community. There are also other situations where the World Federation of the Deaf would also encourage more national sign language within the country. There are also political reasons or influences affecting language naming within the deaf community.
Hello, my name is Tano Angoua, and today I will present the sign language situation in Côte d'Ivoire. Here we have multiple sign languages. Firstly, we have historically ASL was brought to Côte d'Ivoire by Andrew Foster. And Foster used ASL for deaf education. But later, researchers researched and found that there is local signing. And the deaf community uses local signs, but the schools don't use it. But now, over time, ASL, as it is now, has evolved, and new signs were added, more signs were added, also from local signing. And the question is, what name to give to this new variety? No name has been picked yet. So some researchers have used the name LSF, Langue de Signes de l'Afrique francophone, but I continue to use ASL because it's from America. So now the deaf community prefers to use ASL, and why is that? Well, they say American Sign Language is good. It's a good sign language. And ASL allows you to travel. And with ASL, you can find work. So it's better than ASL, and local signing should be left to the side. But my research actually proposes that local signing can really be important, and that the deaf community should continue to connect with local signing. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tatiana. I'm from Gabon. I'm working on the sign language research in Gabon. What is the sign language issue in Gabon? Many years ago, Foster created the first school for the deaf and brought American Sign Language from America. 10 years later, the state decided to change the language of the school because we are French-speaking, and the French Sign Language arrived. Apart of that, the interpreter trained by the Jehovah's Witnesses sign pure American Sign Language. However, at the same time, a sign language has emerged, which the deaf use and call Gabonese Sign Language, langue des signes gabonaise. Let's go back to the education in the private sector as well as in the public sector. The languages used are different. In the public sector is LSF, French Sign Language, used by the hearing signers. And in the private sector, LSG is used by the teacher, deaf teachers. Here is the situation of the sign language in Gabon, which is very confused with this multilingualism in the sign languages. But the deaf community want which language? The deaf community are fighting for the recognition and the promotion of Gabonese Sign Language, LSG. Thank you.
Then on to the issue of labeling sign languages and which label to use, in particular the national label, is an interesting question, and we actually see quite some variation and sometimes even confusion there. So in some cases it's a sign language of foreign origin that became localized, that is labeled as the national sign language, for example in Gabon, and in other places it is actually the real very locally evolved sign language that is the national sign language, as is the case in Guinea-Bissau. And sometimes we also see that there is actually multiple sign language varieties covered by one and the same national label, as was found by Timothy Hadjah for Ghana, where there was actually 3 sign varieties covered by the label of Ghanaian Sign Language. So, to conclude, it looks like indeed to understand sign language ecologies, we need indeed see the influence of the timing of the introduction of deaf education, for example. So where we see that where deaf education was started early by Foster, we see a stronger position and integration of American Sign Language, for example, in Ghana, as compared to Guinea-Bissau, where really the local sign language is very prominent and strong. We also see that deaf networks and sign language activism have had a significant impact. In particular, Foster's network, which led to the development of LSAF, the African Francophone Sign Language, that was promoted and by the Dictionary of Tamomo and is widely used till today. And we also see that relations with that we see parallels in the way polyglossia exists in spoken languages and in sign languages, with formal colonial languages being the high prestige variety in spoken languages, and with ASL or French or Portuguese being sign language being the high prestige variant in sign language polyglossia, and the local sign languages and spoken languages being viewed as the low prestige varieties.